What I want to talk to you today about are the 5 best practices in nonprofit crowdfunding. Originally, when I was putting together this presentation, it was titled How to Plan a Nonprofit Crowdfunding Campaign. But in reality, crowdfunding isn't a linear planning process. It's tangents. It's different aspects coming together and conglomerating together. So instead of focusing on a linear path of planning a campaign, I decided to actually just give you the 5 best practices. So my name is Rob Wu. I'm the CEO of CauseVox. CauseVox is a nonprofit crowdfunding platform, as well as a peer-to-peer fundraising platform for not only nonprofits, but also social good projects. We help out over 16,000 organizations, campaigns, as well as individuals with their crowdfunding campaigns, whether it be for their mom or dad with breast cancer, all the way to organizations like the Red Cross, the United Way. Do you guys know Jeremy Lin, the basketball player? He uses us. AJ Pujols, he also uses us, and a whole bunch of athletes as well. So you can tweet me, it's Rob J. Wu, as well as CauseVox, and I'll get to our marketing team or me directly. So after this presentation, if you have questions, I'll be around. I'm also around online all the time. So feel free to ask any questions you have related to crowdfunding, to CauseVox, to NTEN. I've been to NTEN about 1 billion times, so I'm an advocate for it. All right. So what I want to do first is to poll the audience. I talked to probably 80% of you guys, except for this crowd over here. So I apologize. So what I wanted to ask is, in terms of your role at your nonprofit or your function, your day-to-day, I want to take a poll to have a better sense of what you guys really focus on. So how many of you are development directors or who work in the funding area? Just a handful. How many of you are kind of the executive director or CEO of the organization? Okay. How many of you are marketing and communications people? All right, so what are the rest of you? Okay, the rest of you are just shy. So it sounds like it's a pretty good mix with maybe around 30% of people not being in a role. All right. The other question I wanted to ask is related to your experience doing crowdfunding or any type of peer-to-peer campaign. So beginner, intermediate, and advanced. All right, so no. Beginner, intermediate, and pro. Okay, that's a little easier to understand. So how many of you are beginners? You self-classify as beginners. And you're kind of in between, right? How many of you are more the kind of the medium, intermediate? So you've done a few campaigns before. How many of you are pros? All right, good. Good, all right, so I'm gonna cater this presentation towards the majority. So that's just how it is. I know it sucks. So some of you are kind of more intermediate or in between, so apologies for that. So I'm gonna cater to the majority of the room just so that the majority of people will get the most value out of this presentation. But if you have specific questions, like if you're more of a kind of intermediate type of crowdfunder, or if you're in a different function, if you're like a board member for an organization, if you have specific questions, feel free to ask me. So I want to make sure that I get all your questions answered. So before we start, and I already said that, but before we begin kind of the meat of the project, I wanted to first talk about a personal story. So how many of you remember what happened in March of 2011? Okay, March of 2011 was, this is a giveaway, is the Japan tsunami that happened, right? 2011, 2010 was also the beginning of where crowdfunding really began to thrive and take off. So what happened in the Japan tsunami was that on March 11th, there was an earthquake off the coast of Japan. I'm just refreshing your memory. And it was the 5th biggest earthquake ever recorded in history, and the biggest earthquake ever recorded in Japan. So as a result, what happened was there was actually tidal waves of 133 feet high. So if you imagine that, we're about on the 11th floor, which is about 133 feet, 120 feet. So if you imagine this building coming at you full of water. That's what it's like. And waves actually went in 6 miles deep. So if you imagine yourself running for an hour, keeping a good 10-minute mile, some people can do that, I can't. Just running for an hour straight, and you can't even get away from the water. And what also happened was the waves were so strong, the earthquake was so strong, that it actually moved the island of Japan 8 feet. So if you can imagine the force required to move a giant island, even moving Manhattan, which is a tiny, tiny island compared to Japan, moving that 8 feet, as well as it even shifted the Earth's axis by 10 inches. So the magnitude of force of the earthquake was astronomical. At the end of the day, what happened was there was 15,000 people who died, 6,000 people who were injured, and actually 2,000 people who are missing, and the majority of them are soon to be gone as well. So what happened here was the earthquake struck, we saw the massive destruction, and I was at a conference called South by Southwest. It's based in Austin. It's a combination of a music festival, a film festival, as well as what we'll call an interactive festival. It's basically a fancy word for an internet festival where a whole ton of geeks, a whole ton of marketers go and just, it's like spring break for adults that are nerds. So I was there. So basically what happened is a core group of people, we said, hey, instead of this vanity that's happening with social media and at the internet and kind of what's happening at the conference, why don't we repurpose this attention towards social good? Why don't we create a crowdfunding campaign, and then why don't we get people involved to raise funds? So that's what happened, and within 10 days, we raised over $125,000 through social media and through crowdfunding. So, and the reason why I'm telling you this is because in this presentation today, it was put together through a lot of the best practices, a lot of the learnings that I found through raising the $125,000 in 10 days. As well as from experience looking at over 16,000 campaigns on our platform, distilling what works, what doesn't work, and then kind of putting it together in a presentation for you guys. So a lot of this is colored by my experience, because I have personal experience doing crowdfunding, but a lot of it's also colored by what other nonprofits do on our platform. So just to give you a brief overview, a little more context of kind of where I stand. So what CauseVox does is we're a nonprofit crowdfunding platform. We can use a platform to create your own fundraising site very easily, just within a few steps. So you can use our platform to not only create crowdfunding campaigns, but you can also use it for peer-to-peer campaigns, like runs, walks, and races. Individuals can kind of go out there and help you fundraise. And it's super easy, just in 4 steps, you can launch a campaign. So we have something called a site builder that allows you to easily customize the appearance of your campaign sites. A few years ago, Network for Good did a study, and they said that branded donation pages raise more money than generic unbranded donation pages. So we actually took that to heart, and we built a site builder into our crowdfunding platform that allows you to actually change the design, change the look and feel, integrate it into your website, all without needing to know how to code. In addition, you get like a lot of search benefits because you can use your own domain name too. You can customize site settings, so it's very flexible. You can put in personal fundraising pages as an extension of your organization crowdfunding, and then you can easily take donations. So that's what we do at CauseVox. I do have flyers for most of you. There's a promo code, so you can learn more by following the website. Lots of features to help you crowdfund very easily. So just to move forward, so what is crowdfunding? So I know some of you are beginners, but I wanted to get a kind of a check of what you guys are thinking. So who can tell me what crowdfunding is? Go ahead, Yangbo.
Oh, yes. So just take many donations from a wide variety of sources, channel towards one campaign.
Yep, so basically that's right. So what crowdfunding is, it's an easy way to typically online to raise donations through not only your core supporters, but also to raise donations from the general public. So some of you might be thinking, hey, this sounds very much like a donation page that I have already on my website. Well, it's a little different, because what crowdfunding is, it's like a souped up donation page, meaning that it not only combines elements of storytelling, but also combines elements of gamification and also elements of social media as well. So when you combine those different techniques into a donation page, then that's what crowdfunding is. Because it helps you propel your cause, your project, whatever you're fundraising for, to the next level through those different techniques. So let me show you a few examples. So the potato salad campaign, who knows about this? A few of you, yeah. This is a totally silly campaign. For the majority of you who don't know what it is, so it was a crowdfunding campaign launched by this guy named Zach Danger Brown. So I don't think that's his real name. So basically what he wanted to do is he said, hey, I'm hungry, I want to raise funds on Kickstarter so I can make a potato salad. So completely 100% stupid idea, especially if you compare it to your missions and what you guys are fundraising for. But eventually he raised over 50K. So what happened was that it beat his expectations, right? So he used crowdfunding as a way to not only tell a story about a potato salad, but also have social sharing, and then have some gamification techniques over here with the donation counter. But also he really leveraged press to get a lot of donations. So he got into CNN, he got into TechCrunch, he got into the mainstream media, and it actually propelled him to raise a ton of money. So the idea here is that crowdfunding can help you raise funds that you normally wouldn't raise, as well as crowdfunding and the discipline that you go through in terms of planning the campaign can help you really distill a single idea that really resonates with the general public and your core supporters. And then the sweet spot is then all these different techniques such as the social sharing, the storytelling, the gamification can help you propel and get you into new audiences as well. The main reason why this campaign succeeded was because it was a wacky idea, meaning it was a very sticky idea that people really understood and people thought was funny. Humor definitely is a great storytelling technique, which we'll go over in the storytelling section of our best practice. But also he got into press as well, which is another thing that I'll talk over as a best practice. So let me show you some more relevant nonprofit examples. Let me see if I can. There. So in terms of nonprofit examples, a lot of nonprofits use crowdfunding in different ways, right? So the easiest way is really similar to the potato salad campaign, right? So someone has a need. So with this nonprofit is that they need to buy new mattresses. So what they do is they'll set a goal. So you have the gamification technique over here, progress against the goal. Then also what this nonprofit is using is what we call the impact metric technique as well. So instead of just counting dollars, which is very focused on more product and service-based campaigns, you can actually focus on the impact, right? So a lot of you know that the more you're able to show impact, then the more donations you'll get. So as a part of a nonprofit crowdfunding campaign, this impact metric is very unique. And then also there's typically a days remaining counter as well, storytelling related to it, social sharing related to it, help you drive donations. So in the simplest form, that's one type of nonprofit crowdfunding campaign. Another type of crowdfunding campaign is related to more what we call a crowdfunding with peer-to-peer. So instead of peer-to-peer just being a run, walk, or race, it can be actually an online event or an online activity you want people to take part of. So Story Pirates, they're based in New York City. What they do is they get kids to write skits. Like 5-year-olds can write skits. And then people like Stephen Colbert, Conan, people on SNL, Jon Stewart, Jessica Williams, they'll perform out the stories to the kids, and the kids will want to write even more. So with Story Pirates, they use crowdfunding as a way to complement their in-person event that they have. So not only are they using these gamification techniques over here to drive donations, but also they're using personal fundraising pages as well. So if I scroll down over here, if I click on Kim Parker, so Kim Parker, this is a personal fundraising page, otherwise known as a personal crowdfunding page. And she's a volunteer for the organization, and she's able to do the same thing that you saw what Zach Danger Brown did. It kind of set a goal, have an appeal, raise donations for friends and family. So in the simplest format, that's also how it works. And then very lastly, you also have individuals that are fundraising for a good cause. So very similarly, they're storytelling with narratives, visual, gamification techniques, social sharing as a way to get donations as well. So kind of any questions on some of the examples that I've shown you so far? Very straightforward? Okay, awesome. Where's my PowerPoint? Okay. So you've seen a few examples of nonprofits, individuals, crowdfunding. Now, what really has changed that? So what I'm going to tell you now is really good for you guys who, there are a few, when I was polling the audience before, a lot of you were trying to say, hey, how do I sell this to my organization, or how do I sell this to my boss? So the next few slides really would give you some ammunition for that. So there are three major forces that really caused crowdfunding to really blow up in the past few years. So the first one is the recovering economy, right? So we have the lowest unemployment rate in years since 2011, I believe, or even earlier. People have more disposable income, or have more confidence at least. So more people are employed, so there's more money floating around very easily. The second force is the ubiquitous internet. So all of you probably have a phone, smartphone in your pocket. Many of you are on your phones right now and not looking at me. So the internet is everywhere, right? A lot of you are tweeting. So what that means is that, especially when it comes to online forms of fundraising, online forms of donating, people prefer to do it on the internet because their eyes are glued on their screens. So I get an Amazon package every single day for some reason because my wife buys a lot of Amazon items. So the internet is everywhere. You can order Amazon on your phone. So the consumer's behavior is also changing too, right? So before, a few years ago, people still wanted to write checks. I don't know, when's the last time you guys wrote a check? It's been a long time, right? Oh, come on. Yeah, so typically for rent, maybe for a large charitable contribution, maybe to your parents. But the consumer behavior has really shifted away from kind of tangible paper form, and it's shifted to what we call online form, right? So a lot of Amazon going on, a lot of PayPal going on, a lot of crowdfunding going on. And because of these three forces, it's actually shifted the whole behavior of people and has allowed crowdfunding to really flourish. So as a result, what happens? So last year, 2013, 30% of the $5 billion in terms of crowdfunding went to social causes. So I don't know if a lot of you guys work in nonprofits, right? So I don't know if you guys have seen the impact of this, but of the $5 billion in crowdfunding, that includes like product and service-based, investment-based crowdfunding, the majority comes from social causes. So you guys are poised to really take advantage of this. And studies have shown that also that crowdfunding is expected to grow 85% this year as well. So just imagine the 5 billion turning into around 9 billion and you guys getting 30% of it. So it's a huge market. In terms of internet fundraising, studies have shown that it's growing about 15% a year as well. So a lot of things have shifted online and a lot of things are moving towards this. So when you go talk to your boss later this year, or sorry, later this week, you say, hey, we're missing a boat on this, we should get on it today. So what I want to do next is actually present to you the 5 best practices in nonprofit crowdfunding. A lot of this actually aligns with planning a crowdfunding campaign. There are a few holes just because we don't have a lot of time today. We're limited on time. I can't talk for 3 hours, unfortunately, and you guys probably get bored. But we have an ebook on how to plan a nonprofit crowdfunding campaign. It's free. And at the end of the presentation, I'll give you a link to it so you can just download it and read it on your own time or actually read it on the subway back home. So if you guys are ambitious like that. All right, so the first best practice. So I used to work in the Pentagon. I used to be an ex-NSA consultant before I wanted to do social good stuff and actually change the world for the better, spy shit, stuff like that. But I don't do that stuff anymore. And I actually worked with like a lot of military personnel when I worked at the Pentagon. And a lot of them were, Marines, Army Rangers, special ops people. And how they approach projects is that there always needs to be a mission. Like, what is the mission? They will always ask, what do we need to do? Like, what were they aiming for? And what they would do is they would align that mission with all the activities they perform. So crowdfunding is the same exact thing. Crowdfunding is having a project, having a mission, and aligning all of your startup people in your nonprofit, all of your staff, aligning them to that one mission so you can actually make a difference. If there's no alignment, if there's no mission, then you're gonna squander a lot of resources. So the first best practice is actually start with a well-defined goal because you need to have a mission, right? So how do you actually get to a goal? A lot of questions that we get at CauseVox is, what kind of goal should I set? How do I set a goal? I don't know how to set a goal. Is it this? Is it that? So I'm gonna kind of tell you how to do it. So when I talked to you guys before the session today, a lot of you actually work at organizations. And when I took the poll, a lot of you said that you've actually run a fundraising campaign before. So what's really useful in that experience, at least, is that you can use those baselines. So if you never crowdfunded before, you can easily just look at how much you fundraised offline in the past, or how much you've raised as an average kind of campaign in the past, and use that as a baseline. If you want to think about it in a different perspective, instead of dollars raised, you can think about it in terms of the number of donors you have. So you can look at your mailing list, you can look at your CRM to see how many donors you have, multiply that by the average donation that crowdfunding gets, which is around $80, and then come up with a fundraising goal that way as well. So use the baseline as the first step. If you don't have a baseline, for example, some of you are startup nonprofits, you have no idea, you've never done a fundraising campaign before. So what you can also do is think about it from a different perspective. Think about it from the perspective of what do you need in order to create an impact. typically most crowdfunding campaigns are very project focused, very program focused. So what that means is very discrete, very defined. I need $10,000 to get to a certain level of milestone or impact, or I need $20,000 to get to create and impact 1,000 kids in New York City. So alternatively, especially if you've never done any type of crowdfunding campaign before, think about how much you need in order to make an impact. Or what you can do is look at comparables too. So meaning that since crowdfunding has been around for a few years, you can also look at what other organizations are raising, what other organizations are doing, either on Kickstarter or on CauseVox or other platforms as well, just so you have a baseline to see how you can set a goal. The main difference between setting a goal for a product and service crowdfunding campaign versus a social impact or nonprofit crowdfunding campaign is this. So a lot of the goals that are set by products and services are really focused on a dollar metric, right? We want to raise X amount. We want to raise 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, million. But for nonprofits, you get more benefit if you shift your perspective and focus on the impact. So instead of saying we need to raise $10,000 at the end, you can say that we need to raise enough funds to impact 2,000 kids for a whole summer in New York City. So focus on the impact instead, and that'll give you a lot more results than just focusing on a dollar amount. And then very lastly, in terms of defining a goal, how many of you have heard of the SMART acronym? Yeah, most of you. Yeah, so what SMART is, very briefly, is that all goals, all missions should be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. Related to crowdfunding, what's most important in terms of the SMART is, you can cross out the A, so SMRT, is that is the rest of the four, essentially. So be attainable, every campaign should be a stretch, but if I were to even boil it down even more, it would be that you want to make sure that your goal is timely and that it's very specific. Because everything else in crowdfunding, especially if you're using a platform, will push you towards the other three, right? So after you have a well-defined goal, after you can rally the troops, essentially, you want to think about rewards and donation tiers. So just to kind of get a temperature check, do you guys even know what I'm talking about in terms of rewards, what that means? Nod of heads? Okay, so some of you don't. So very briefly, this is a campaign. So rewards are basically something that you get for donating a certain amount on a campaign. So for example, if I'm running a campaign to write a book, if you donate $100, I'll give you a free book. If you donate $200, I'll give you a signed book. If you donate $1,000, I'll appear whenever you want with a book that's signed. So kind of the donor gets something in return for supporting the campaign. A lot of nonprofits fall or they falter during this step. When they go ahead and when they try to plan a campaign, they see, okay, well, the Pebble Watch, I need to give rewards. Or they see like the potato salad campaign, I need to give something to my donors in return. And that actually is a pitfall. But first, just to review, rewards are recognition items that people get. But there was a study that was recently done in 2012, and the results will shock you. It sounds like BuzzFeed or Upworthy. I've been working on that. But Yale professors in the Journal of Economic Psychology, they did a study in 2012 about charitable giving and rewards, and they found that rewards actually reduce giving. So especially if you're a nonprofit running a campaign, you should not follow other crowdfunding campaigns with rewards. So you guys get that? There should be a giant X going on in your head right now because it reduces charitable giving. And the reason why is because when they did the study, donors who got a reward for donating, they actually felt selfish. The motivation turned from altruism to selfishness.
So, how big was the sample though?
What's that?
How big was the sample though?
I didn't read the study from cover to cover, but I read synopsis, so you can download it and let us know. But it was a study done by Yale, so they're pretty smart, so I trust them. So essentially what should be done over here is instead of focusing on giving your donors a tote bag or giving them a trip somewhere, you should give them rewards that are more what we call impact focused. So for example, if you're helping people in New York City get out of homelessness, then what you should be giving them is maybe a face-to-face with the person that they've served, Or if you're a microfinance organization, what you can do is you can give them rewards or for example, scarves that the people that benefited from the micro loan created. So something that's really aligned to your organization or aligned to the mission or project that you're launching. This way, you'll avoid the whole reward psychology that's going on over here, and then you'll be better off in the long term. So again, very tangibly, how it will look on your crowdfunding campaign is like this. So for example, if you're a water charity, maybe you're Charity Water, for example, then instead of giving your donor base tickets to a game or a tote bag with a Charity Water brand, you'll say, hey, if you donate $100, you can actually serve a family for 30 years. So that's what you want to do. Thank you letters also work really well, but anything that's impact focused works better than a tier that's not. Any questions on this? Okay. So best practice number 3. This is actually my favorite section because you'll find out really soon. All right. So a lot of you may be asking, hey, I don't know how to tell a story, or I don't have a sexy story. You might be saying, hey, I work in legal, or like my cause is based on kind of advocating, and I don't have a sexy cause, I'm not helping kids. What do I do, right? So a lot of you might be asking that. Well, it's actually very easy to tell a compelling story. We found that crowdfunding campaigns that focus on creating a compelling story and going through the discipline of actually thinking through what kind of story to tell, rather than just writing a fundraising appeal, or rather than just copy and paste their mission statement into a crowdfunding campaign, perform a lot better. So what I want to do next is to actually help you create a story, or help you have some of the fundamentals. So when you're launching a crowdfunding campaign, you can actually follow similar storytelling formats, plug in a few things, and then you have a story that really resonates and it really gets shared, right? It makes sense? All right. So the easiest way to actually find a story that can be viral, essentially, that can get shared, that can drive donations, is to actually watch a lot of movies. So I watch a lot of TV. When I was a kid, I didn't do sports, that's why I'm kind of short. All I did was watch TV. So every day I just watch movies. I watch Knight Rider, Transformers, a whole bunch of other batch TV shows. But anyways, you can actually take a look at your Netflix, your Hulu, or whatever TV shows you watch, and actually figure out what kind of plots they use, and then use that as a way for your own crowdfunding campaign. So let's take a look at a few plot lines. So there's 4 plot lines I want to share that is really predominant in movies and TV shows, and you actually use this as a crowdfunding campaign, and I have an example after each one. So who's this handsome guy over here? Who knows? James Bond. James Bond. Yeah, exactly who it is. So the first storyline is James Bond's storyline, right? In every single movie that he has, it's the same plot line. Nothing is different about the movies except for the main character, Bond, right? So what it is Bond is the protagonist, he's the hero. Then there's a bad guy. For example, in Skyfall, the latest movie, the bad guy was with this old agent called Silva, I think. And he was the bad guy. So it's basically Bond fighting against the bad guy. And of course, Bond wins. We all know the ending. Bond always wins. And in another movie, there's Batman, right? We all know who Batman is, Bruce Wayne. So in every Batman movie, Batman the good guy, protagonist. And then there's the bad guy, Joker, Poison Ivy, Penguin, some other people. So Batman fights against the bad guy and he wins, right? Lastly, in Avengers, same thing. If you guys watched it, there's the Avengers, Iron Man, etc., fighting against some aliens and they win. So that's the plot line. We call it overcoming the monster. There's someone who wants to defeat a bad guy and they need your help to win. So that's a plot line you can use, right? So for example, there's an organization called Earth Rights International. They don't have a sexy cause. What they do is they advocate against the wrongdoings. They basically fight against corporations that are doing bad things to their environment, bad things to their world, right? Not very sexy because they're fighting against corporations. So what they wanted to do is their plot line for their crowdfunding campaign on CauseVox was that, hey, we're the David. Earth Rights, we're small, we're nimble, we're under-resourced, and we want to fight against people like Chevron, people against like Monsanto, corporations all around the world. So there's the Goliath that we need to defeat, and we need your help to actually defeat them. So in their crowdfunding campaign, they raised over $24,000. And the way they were able to do that was to position themselves as a hero that was under-resourced to fight against some bigger hero that needed to be defeated as a way to do it. So you can use the same plot line too. So what you'll do is you'll replace Earthrights International with your organization. You figure out who your enemy is, plop that in, and then in between is your call to action for your supporters to take part of it. So super easy, right? All right, so who knows this movie? It's kind of hard to see. It's Will Smith and his son. Yeah. Yep, so Pursuit of Happiness. Yes, awesome. Very inspiring movie. So in this movie, if you guys haven't watched it, it's Will Smith. He's playing a guy named Chris Gardner. This is kind of based off a true story. And basically, he has no money. He spends his life savings buying like this product that's really hard to sell. And eventually, you see him living in the subway restroom, which is disgusting, living in shelters, and kind of trying to get by and provide for his son, right? So we call this plot line rags to riches. So you have somebody who doesn't have a lot. Either it's social capital, financial capital, skills. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's just there's some type of poverty or deficit in some type of area. And then they get transformed into a higher level of being. Like either they get a job, or they get money, or if they are able to provide for their family, whatever it is, there's some type of transformation involved over here. We'll call it rags to riches. So for example, how this works is Giving Tuesday this year is December 2nd. This happened last year on Giving Tuesday. But basically, Project Renewal, they're a nonprofit based in New York. And what they do is they care for, train, and serve homeless people in New York. So if you're in Midtown, which we are right now, if you walk around, sometimes you'll see the big trucks. It'll say Project Renewal. The next time you see it, you'll say, hey, you did this campaign. But basically, they use the rags to riches storyline as part of their crowdfunding campaign. So what they did is instead of focusing on giving to the organization, they found one person, just one person that their organization has helped. And the guy's name is Harry. And they provided the story of Harry. So Harry was a homeless person. He didn't have anything. And through Project Renewal, he was able to get job skills. He was able to get trained. He was able to transform his life. So now he has his own apartment in New York City, which is, rent is really high, as well as he has a full-time job as well. So you can use the same plot line. And what you need to do is first find that one person that you've served, find their transformation, and tell the story about the transformation, the rags to riches, right? So very simple. You can do this too. All right, the next movie is Lord of the Rings. All right, a little slow today. So I never remember this guy's name, but that's Frodo, and this guy is Bilbo Baggins? Sam. Everybody says Bilbo. Come on, guys. Step it up today. Step it up. All right. Your homework for today is actually rewatch Lord of the Rings after you get home. So this is the storyline of the quest, right? So you had the hobbits getting the ring, helping, making friends with other people, and trying to fight a bad guy to get somewhere. So the story isn't really about the end battle. The story is really about the journey, right? So a lot of people say that the journey is more important than the destination. That's what the storyline is about. So it's a quest of a dedicated group of people coming together in a way to tackle some type of challenge. So, for example, for Breast Cancer Action, a charity based in San Fran, there were a group of friends. A guy named Ryan, he's basically just like you and me, meaning that he doesn't work at a nonprofit. He's a designer by trade, and his mom had breast cancer, so he decided to get a group of friends, his brothers, together, tool themselves with a fundraising platform, and to raise a lot of money for breast cancer research. Essentially, that's his campaign. So the storyline of the quest is really about the journey, right? So especially if you're doing any type of personal crowdfunding campaign, so if you guys are not fundraising for the organization, or if you're a startup nonprofit just getting started, then the journey and quest type of plot line work really, really well because you're telling a story that's really personal and you're gathering people together to join you in this expedition, in this journey, in this challenge, and it works really well. So for example, Ryan, what he did is he launched a campaign called Beard for Boobs. So he would grow a beard, his brothers would grow a beard, kind of like Movember, and then it would benefit breast cancer. So it's kind of boobs. That's all I have to say. So they raise a ton of money this way, and you can use the same thing too. So what you'll need to do is to think about, okay, what is the journey that we want to walk? Where do we want to go? Like, how can we gather people to join us in this journey and get to a certain point? So not all organizations can use this. You can really benefit from it, especially if you're launching something new, like a new program, a new project, a new region. That's the kind of the use cases that we use the Quest for. But if you're just fundraising for something that has been done already, then the Quest is a little more difficult to do, unless you're focusing just on personal fundraising. That makes sense. And lastly, one of my favorite TV shows of all time, Breaking Bad. So Breaking Bad's about this guy named Walter White. So he's in the beginning of the whole series, he's an average Joe, good guy. And then he turns into a drug maker, what do you call it? A drug guy, essentially. And yes, a master chef of drugs. Yes, so that's basically what happens. So it's the tragedy is basically a plot line where you see the protagonist spiraling down, and eventually, in all tragedies, I'm gonna ruin it, they die. So in all tragedies, people die. Okay, according to Farah, he's still alive. So, according to common sense, he's not around. Anyways, so you can also use a tragedy plot line. So, out of the 4 plot lines I'm showing you, this is the only negative one, as you've seen, because negative emotions drive less action than positive emotions. But you can use negative emotions like tragedy, such as what I did. So, as part of the Japan tsunami. So, we focus a lot on the tragedy. People are dying, people are missing, destruction. You need to help now, or you're not a good person. This is essentially what we said. So you could use that as a way for what we call disaster relief, for short-term projects that really need kind of a boost of adrenaline. You can use the tragedy plot line as a way to do it. There's not much of a plot line. You basically just say something bad is happening, yeah, we need your help. For example, there was another nonprofit based in New York that just finished a campaign called Fiverr Children's Foundation. They're based in Midtown somewhere. And they have a camp in upstate. And the camp was actually destroyed a few months ago by a few storms. And they used the tragedy plot line to raise donations for it. And they raised over $20K for it within a short period of time because they focused on the destruction, kind of very similar to Japan tsunami. And they focused on how people needed to help in order to rebuild. So those are 4 different plot lines that you can use. Very simple, very understandable. So the best way for you to get good at telling stories is to really watch a lot of movies. So, when you go tell your boss, hey, I need to get better at storytelling, you need to carve out 2 hours for me every day to watch Netflix. It's a great, great argument. All right. One of the things that people get confused on is that they can only use one storyline. You can actually change storylines together. For example, what Fiverr Children's Foundation could do is they could say, hey, tragedy has happened, so they use the tragedy plot line, and then after their camp is rebuilt, they can do an overcoming the monster plot line or a rags to riches plot line as well to chain it together on a separated campaign. So it's very cool how you can chain different things together for different campaigns. All right. So the next best practice is to build a tribe of champions. So I know we're kind of running short on time. So I want to leave enough time for questions. So to build a tribe of champions, a lot of people think that crowdfunding is free money. So who thinks crowdfunding is free money? Nobody raise your hands because it's not. In order to raise funds, you have to work for it, right? As the immortal Britney Spears says, work, bitch. So you got to work for it. So in order to raise funds on crowdfunding, you have to hustle your ass, right? You can't just expect to launch a campaign and build something and people will not come. People don't come to you. So there's 3 different types of groups of categories of people that you should be focusing on as part of your crowdfunding campaign as a best practice. The first one is promoters, second one is fundraisers, and the last one is donors. So for the Japan Tsunami campaign, I focused a lot on promoters. because we were at a conference and there were a lot of people with social media clout. So the most bang for our buck was to talk to press as well as talk to people who had a lot of influence on social media. So we targeted speakers at the conference for them to tweet it out, for them to share it during their sessions. We talked to press, talked to journalists as a way to really amplify the campaign because the campaign had mass appeal essentially. So when you look at your own campaign that you're planning, you have to think about, okay, does this have mass appeal? Or is this more of a niche type of crowdfunding campaign? For the most part, most nonprofit campaigns are niche. That's just how it is. But there's like a lot of benefits from that. So in terms of looking at the people that you want to build as part of your tribe, people that will help you get the message out initially, the first one is promoters. Those are people that will share your campaign on social media. Those are people who will promote your campaign. They can be board members. They can be people on your list already. So they can just anybody who will help you amplify the message. So one of the biggest questions we get is, how do I advertise my campaign? And your advertisers, for nonprofits specifically, are your promoters, right? There are people within your organization that are going to tweet out, that are going to share it on email, that can help you amplify your message. Okay, the second group of people are what we call fundraisers. So if you're running more of a peer-to-peer based crowdfunding campaign, fundraisers will get you really far. So in the Japan Tsunami campaign, around 50% of the donations that we got actually came from fundraisers. And we did that just by having a call to action for people to create a fundraising page so they can help fundraise for, personally fundraise for the Japan Tsunami. So you can do the same thing too. We recommend that every crowdfunding campaign seriously think about using personal fundraising pages. It's not required, but you'll get a lot of benefit from it. On our platform at least, campaigns that use personal fundraising pages raise twice as much as the campaigns that don't. And the main reason why is because now you're empowering all of your volunteers, all of your board members to create their own mini crowdfunding campaign so they can personalize it. Studies have shown that 25% of the time people donate because their friends ask them to donate, right? And if you're able to personalize a crowdfunding campaign, it'll get you really far. Because these fundraisers not only will help you get donations, but they actually act as a publicity engine for your nonprofit. And lastly, they're your donors, people who are going to donate to you. So these should be not just kind of the whole world. You can't just build a list of 6 billion people, but more about people who seed your campaign with donations, right? There comes a certain tipping point in every campaign where you'll get a ton of donations. And it typically happens on the halfway mark, as well as on the 75% mark, and then very lastly on the 90% mark. So before you launch a campaign, one of the best practices is to find a list of donors who would actually say, hey, I'm gonna donate $1,000, I'm gonna donate $500, I'm gonna donate $100, just so you can pre-fill your campaign with activity. And then once you have that activity of donors, you can actually promote it publicly so that the general public can say, hey, well, there are a ton of people getting involved, I wanna get involved too. All right. And then very lastly, before we do wrap up on questions, is best practice number 5, which is leverage press for your campaign. So as I mentioned before, with the Japan Tsunami campaign, we got into CNN, Ad Age, TechCrunch, Forbes, basically every publication in the whole world. So, and that really drove the success of our campaign. But not every organization should really focus on press. You should only focus on press if your cause has a mainstream appeal and if your cause and campaign is really relevant to the publication that you want to talk to, right? Relevancy is very important. So finding press can be hard because it can be resource draining because you have to do a few things. You have to find the right journalists, create their pitches, get a pitch to them, follow up, and you might get written about 1 out of 10 times. But at the end of the day, that might drive a lot of traffic to you and a lot of awareness, but it's not going to drive a lot of donations because it's not targeted. Well, if you compare traffic you get from personal fundraising pages or even from your own list are more targeted, they're more relevant, they're more personal, so you get a higher conversion rate on that. So there's a kind of disclaimer that you need to think about. I would say only use press, only focus on press, and only dedicate resources to press if you have a mainstream appeal and that you have some experience doing press and that you're able to really find at least a handful of journalists that you have relationships with. So, but if you're set on this press route, there's a few things you need to think about. Basically 3 steps to get press. This is the formula that we used. First one is to target. So you want to find people that are relevant, people that want to talk about your cause area. For example, you can do online research as well as some press resources such as Muckrack, Twitter search is free, tools like Press Friendly or Media Outreach, then you can actually create a press list that's relevant to your cause area. So you want to find a journalist that cares about water, for example, if that's your cause. Or if you want to find a journalist that cares about education, and then pitch to them because they actually care about that and they want to write about you. Or you can take a perspective from looking at the publication. So most publications, there is kind of a nonprofit focus. For example, in the San Francisco Times, there's a nonprofit writer. In Mashable, there's a social good space. So you want to find a journalist that writes in those beats as the ones to target. If you target somebody who just writes about Facebook and Twitter, they're not going to want to write about nonprofits. The second thing is you want to ask yourself, why is this newsworthy, right? This is like the come to Jesus question, like why is this campaign really relevant to the person I want to talk to? If you're not able to answer this, then you shouldn't be doing press. But if you're able to really answer this, then what you should do is come up with certain pitches or basically certain stories that a journalist would want to write about, and then send an email to them, say, hey, we're doing this campaign. It's going to benefit 1,000 people in this field, and here are the materials of it. And then very lastly, the last step is to really pitch to the individual so that they'll write about you. So just any questions on press? Okay, so just in summary, the 5 best practices for nonprofit crowdfunding. First, have a strong mission, right? Remember Army Rangers and how they function. The second one is to rethink rewards because rewards can reduce charitable giving. 3 is to create a compelling story through these 4 storylines: overcoming a monster, rags to riches, the quest, and tragedy. Number 4 is to build a tribe of champions. So you need a core group of supporters to really launch your campaign. And lastly, consider leveraging press for your crowdfunding campaign. Additional resources. So a few resources I want to share, and are you guys going to put this on SlideShare?
Yes.
Okay, so it'll be linkable. So the first one is Introduction to Crowdfunding for Nonprofits. For a lot of you who raised your hands when you said you didn't know what crowdfunding is, this might be good for you, but this will be even better for your boss who has no idea what crowdfunding is. So this will actually introduce you to crowdfunding and when you should use it. The second one is how to plan a nonprofit crowdfunding campaign. I talked about best practices today, but if you're looking for a step-by-step, that's the perfect guide for you. If you're looking for an expansion of what I talked about in terms of storyline, you can go download our Hollywood Storylines ebook. And if you're looking for press, download that guide. And if you're looking to build a tribe of champions, you can download that guide. So basically what I'm saying is we have a guide for everything under the sun. You can find these resources on our website as well as on our blog, and they're completely free. And lastly, if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly through Twitter as well as through our support email. And I think we do have some time for questions. So yes, gentleman in the back.
In approximate cost, if we raise $1, how much of that is taken by you?
So the question is, how much does it cost to do crowdfunding on a crowdfunding platform? So I would say our prices are average, essentially. So on our platform, to do a generic crowdfunding campaign without the personal fundraising pages, without fancy features, then we charge a 2.5% CauseVox transaction fee. And then credit card fees are basically 3%. So let's say someone donates $100 to you, then total fees will be $5.50, essentially. On other platforms, their platform fee might be higher. For example, on Kickstarter, it's 5%. On some of their competitors, it's 6 to 9%, plus credit card fees. So it really just varies. Well, what I always say is that look at the platform, look at your needs, see which platform meet your needs, and then go with that. Yeah, sir.
So like a great presentation, really helpful. What do you feel like around, so if I'm an organization, I'm thinking about doing crowdfunding, what do you think are like the benefits or disadvantages, whatever, for me in kind of thinking whether to do like this style of crowdfunding versus doing like event-based, like on-style fundraising? Mm-hmm. So like, getting people like organized events and that sort of thing, like raise money.
Sure. So I guess the question is when to use like runs, walks, races, when to use crowdfunding. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay, so it really just depends. What we've seen is that organizations that perform the best on their campaigns really have a good understanding of what their support base wants to do, right? So when you do runs, walks, races, your support base has to have a strong focus on endurance, right? Otherwise, nobody's going to participate in that event. So I would say first take a survey or take a temperature check from your core group of supporters that are most active. Figure out what resonates with them. Is it kind of these event-based fundraising where they run a race or do a 5K? Or is it more of a virtual event where everybody can set a goal? Or is it something completely different, more of an activity? For example, people wearing a school dress to raise funds for girls' education. Or if it's something else, if nobody wants to do activity-based fundraising, such as the runs, walks, races, or wearing a school dress, or kind of participating that way, then you might want to think about more project-based fundraising, which lends itself really well to crowdfunding. Saying that, okay, we have a project that needs to get funded, it costs $10K to create a certain amount of impact, and using that as a crowdfunding campaign instead. So first take a temperature check, look at your supporters, and then look at what people really respond to. There's no right or wrong answer. It really just takes kind of testing and pilot projects to really figure out what really resonates with your organization and support base. In the back.
What makes you different from Kickstarter and Indiegogo?
Okay, so the question is, what makes CauseVox different than Kickstarter and Indiegogo? So there are a lot of differences. So I would say, not to get too salesy, but the main difference is that Kickstarter and Indiegogo are what we call more product and service-based crowdfunding platforms. So on Kickstarter, you see a lot of bands, you see like a lot of cool gadgets, and that's really what really drives the crowdfunding success on those platforms. So the first difference between our platform and Kickstarter and Indiegogo is that we focus specifically on nonprofits and social good projects. And what that means is that all of our users are typically in the social good space, whether you're a nonprofit or not. And then all of our features are really geared towards nonprofits and social good projects. So for example, on our platform, you can run a Kickstarter style campaign very easily, or you can plug in those personal fundraising pages so that individuals as part of your organization can actually crowdfund for your organization as well. So that's the first difference. The second difference is that our platform is very customizable because typically we serve like a lot of big charities and they want branding. For us, branding is important, right? Branding is important, yes. So as an organization, branding is important. It gives you more donations and you want to promote your brand. So for our platform, we have a site builder that allows you to customize the whole platform so it looks like your organization and it integrates directly into your website. So you can benefit from the search traffic, the inbound links, as well as you can benefit from the branding. And then lastly, we have customization on the back end to like custom donation receipts. So it's very geared towards nonprofits, impact metrics, very geared towards nonprofits. So our platform is really geared towards organizations and nonprofits.
When we use a platform like yours, we're nonprofit, so we want everybody in our CRM and their donation, and we've already workflows, the auto email, thank you, and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
It seems like it's now separate from that. What kind of data do we get, and is there any integration?
Sure. So it depends on the platform itself. Some platforms expose all the data to you. Some platforms don't give the data to you. So you kind of have to do your due diligence. For our platform, we give you all the donor data because we're so focused on nonprofits that we know that your accountant, your development director needs the postal address, the email address, contact info, transaction ID, all that info. So we allow that as an export. Some platforms have direct integrations with CRMs. For example, our platform, we're going to have a Salesforce integration by the end of this year.
Good job.
Because most nonprofits do use Salesforce. So that's a big pain point for a lot of nonprofits on our platform. So you just have to do your due diligence to see what platforms have what, and then what needs you have. Some nonprofits, they say, hey, having a CRM integration is important, but it's not as important as other things. So they're going to be okay doing it manually, just downloading a spreadsheet and importing it in. Some nonprofits don't have the bandwidth or administrative capacity to do that. So it really just depends on your needs.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Question?
That's the question I was going to ask, but just following up on that, is the donor information, do we own it or do we own it with you? With CauseVox?
Sure. So with our platform, you own it because all the donations go directly into your bank account. It doesn't flow through CauseVox. And on a credit card statement, it says your nonprofit name. So you get not only all the transaction info, but you own all the donations as well.
So all the donor information, you don't use it, CauseVox?
No. So it depends on the platform. For us, we don't cross-sell to your donors because that would not be a good thing to do. But you also have to do due diligence as well. There's a lot of crowdfunding platforms out there. So some crowdfunding platforms actually would solicit to your donors. You just have to figure out, understand if they do or not. And if there's something that is against like your policy or against your needs, then they might not be a best fit for you. Yes?
Is there around the holidays, and just sort of from your experience, you see optimal times or
Right, right. So when we look at kind of the aggregate data on our platform, typically the first 2 weeks of January, you should not launch a campaign, and the last week of December, would not be a good idea to launch a campaign as well, because you're doing year-end fundraising, so it's really different. So, but in terms of the month or the season, it really doesn't matter. So it's more on a case-by-case basis. For example, there was an organization that focused a lot on kids' education, essentially. So, and their campaign was really focused on getting families involved in crowdfunding, right? But the thing is, they decided to launch a campaign during the summer when the core audience was typically on vacation. You know, they're not going to school, they're going on vacation. So they had like a little bit of trouble getting started. So in that instance, what I would recommend is that they first take a look at when their support base will be active or not active, and either target those dates or avoid those dates, for example. So you kind of look at your organization or your project that you're running and kind of look at, okay, is there certain times of the year or are there certain parts of the fundraising calendar that you need to fill in, and you can fill in a campaign with that. There's actually no right or wrong day to launch a campaign, no right or wrong time or day to send out email blasts as well, because everything averages out on our platform at least. Question?
How do you determine how long, like, doing a month, doing 6 weeks, doing 2 months? I mean, how do you kind of think about that?
Sure. So the question is, how do you think about the duration of your campaign? So typically speaking, the average campaign length on our platform is around 30 to 40 days. So typically speaking, crowdfunding, not only on our platform, but other platforms as well, is very short-term focused, right? When we talk about the first best practice about defining the goal, one of it is about being timely and being really specific. And the reason why you need to be timely and specific is because crowdfunding lends itself really well when there's a short duration of time. Because when you have a days remaining counter or hours remaining counter, that lends itself really well to driving people to participate in the campaign. So typically I recommend, on average, for organizations to set a crowdfunding campaign for 30 to 40 days. But the thing is, we've seen campaigns be successful on our platform for much shorter durations. You know, there are campaigns that could do just day-long campaigns, 24 hours, and they raise a ton of funds, or organizations that do year-long campaigns and they raise a ton of funds as well. So it really just depends on your needs. But typically, if you're just getting started, I would say just do a 30-day campaign as a way just to go with some of the best practices. Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
Is there a certain average amount of time to prepare a campaign? It seems like the preparation actually just isn't working.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So is there like, or really have
Right. So the question is there a kind of a duration of time that you need to prepare for the campaign? So typically speaking, we see organizations prepare 3 months in advance before they launch a campaign, mainly because there's like a lot of assets that you need to create, right? There's the story. You want to do a video, you need to hire somebody or do it yourself. Or if there's a communications plan, they need to develop that. So typically 3 months gives you an adequate amount of time. Now, it doesn't mean that every single day you're working on the campaign. It just means that you should start thinking about putting together the plan for the campaign 3 months out. Any other questions? Yes.
So I remember you talking earlier about how ubiquitous the internet is.
Mm-hmm.
But if we have an audience who maybe is not so tapped into that, what kind of security can you give them for financial information? I know you said everything goes directly to our financial institutions.
Yep.
But there's been a lot of stories lately about things being hacked.
Right.
Do you provide any sort of security?
Yep. So the question is there security behind financial transactions through crowdfunding? Right. So on our platform as well as other platforms, in order to do any type of credit card processing, you either have to be PCI compliant, which basically there's kind of a checklist of compliance that prevents unauthorized use as well as ensures safeguards to financial transactions. So on our platform, it's the same thing. We use standard 256-bit encryption for all donation processing, as well as all of our donation processing partners do the same thing. And generally speaking, that's the same thing with other crowdfunding platforms as well. So typically there's kind of like that little lockbox, as well as there might be a badge that says it's secure. Sure.
Okay, Kickstarter and Indiegogo, I believe, are the most known or popular platforms. How do you manage, how does CauseVox manage to go out there and obtain the same exposure, basically?
Sure. So I guess the question is, how do we market at CauseVox, or how do we get our name out there?
Both, right?
Okay.
Market, and how do you actually reach the network of people that you're trying to?
Okay. So I guess this question is more about how do we operate as a company, right?
Okay.
So I can answer the marketing question for you after one last question, because I just want to make it relevant to the audience. Yes.
I was wondering too, forgive me if this has already been answered, but as far as Kickstarter works, if you don't raise the amount of money that you set out to raise, you don't get anything.
Yeah.
And as far as Indiegogo, they're a lot more forgiving. So where are you on that spectrum?
We're on the forgiving side. So just for the audience knowledge, there's a couple different types of crowdfunding. There's one method called all or nothing, which means that unless you meet your goal that you set, then you get no money at all. Everybody gets refunded. So if you're just $1 shy of meeting your goal, then you won't get any of the funds. There's another type of crowdfunding called, some people call it flexible, but some people just call it general crowdfunding, where it's if you don't meet your goal, you still get to keep all the funds that you raise. So because we're so focused on nonprofits, we believe that even if you meet 90% of your goal, 80% of your goal, you can still make an impact with those funds, right? It's not like you're developing a product that needs a lot of upfront investment in order to get started. Typically for social good projects and nonprofits, you can still do a lot with limited funds, as you guys are probably well aware of. So with our platform, you keep whatever you raise. Okay, any other questions? Going once, going twice, and sold. All right, so thank you for coming. I'll be around for questions if you guys have more specific questions. And we also have these fancy flyers with promo codes if you guys want to take one. Thank you so much.